My baby sister and her boyfriend are following me. Every time I go to make this video, a new camera gets announced or rumored or released or something, and it throws just a monkey wrench into the question of whether the M50 is worth getting in 2020. And now it's almost 2021, and I just now getting around to this video. And so what happened yesterday? The rumor mill exploded with news that the M50 Mark II is just around the corner, and I'm sitting here thinking, can I even make this video? We don't even know what's gonna be released in a couple of weeks. And I'm like, well, yeah, because even if the M50 Mark II comes out and is amazing, the M50 is still existent. Now, of course, what I mean by that is not that it, actually exists, but that the M50 is not yet obsolete. And so I wanted to talk about what the M50 is good for, when you might want to consider it, and when you probably shouldn't get it. First of all, what the M50 is not good for, and it's not good for 4K. Just period. The 4K looks okay. It's not bad 4K, it's not great 4K. It's not good for high frame rates. It's only 720p at 120 frames a second. You're not going to get super good slow motion. You can do things to make it better, and it is usable for social media, but it's not really good looking 120 frames a second. It's not good for color grading. The M50 only shoots at 30 megabits a second in 24p. It doesn't have enough information to push and pull the colors. It's not good for dynamic range. Pretty much every other camera, Sony, Panasonic, I don't know about Nikon, the EOS Rs, they're all much better than the M50 when it comes to dynamic range. The lens selection is pretty mediocre, though there are some good lenses out, and there are a few new good lenses that are coming out that are not out yet. But overall, compared to pretty much every other platform except, again, maybe Nikon, the lens selection is just mediocre. Now, if you get the Canon EF to EFM adapter, you expand your lens selection, but besides a few smaller lenses, the M50 body itself is undersized to use big DSLR lenses. I think that's all the negatives. Battery life maybe, but that's not that big of a deal. Guess the only other thing is that we don't know how long Canon's gonna support the system. They may end up releasing 1 or 2 more cameras and then killing it off. That's what a lot of the rumors have been recently. I don't know. But if they keep the Canon M50 system, the M50 is definitely the best, intro into the platform. Now, after all that, you might be wondering, well, then what is the M50 even good for? And there are a few things that the M50 is a great camera for. Number one is 1080p. I know I mentioned that it was a low bitrate 1080p, but that is not all bad. Basically, everything great about the M50 is wrapped up in the fact that it is a budget, cheap, beginner camera. Now, it does sound counterintuitive to say, why does a beginner camera make it so good? There are a few things that people don't think about when they're looking at getting new cameras. 4K is still not the standard when it comes to editing hardware. You can get a machine pretty easily and inexpensively that will edit the 1080p footage from the M50, but in order to get something that is going to be able to edit 4K in the same way that a budget machine is able to edit 1080p, you are going to put out a lot more money. In fact, the reason why I almost never use 4K on this channel is because my computer literally cannot handle it. My last video I shot in 4K with the GH5, but in order to edit just that very basic talking head segment, I had to deactivate the video file and just edit it according to the audio waveforms. And with that in mind, the great thing about the M50 is that it does a good job with 1080p. It has a low bitrate, so you can't color edit it in the same way that you can higher bitrate 1080p or 4K, but even then, when I was trying to edit my high quality 4K footage from the GH5, it was my computer and my editing program that wouldn't allow me to do color editing. Whenever I tried to push the colors in any direction, It's other than just like adding contrast and saturation, the computer just couldn't handle it, and it put all sorts of weird artifacts in my footage. The M50, however, great images straight out of the camera. As long as you nail your white balance, lighting, and framing, your 1080p footage is going to look great. Autofocus. That's a big deal that the M50 has that a lot of us who are just trying to throw up a camera do not want to have to worry about manual focus. The menus on the M50 are very intuitive, and because it's more of a beginner camera, you don't have a million menu items like you do on Panasonic and Sony. Now, 2 years ago, I would have said, and the M50 has a mic jack, but that's sort of become standard. Even Sony on the really budget cameras is now putting in mic jacks, so that's not as big of an issue, but it does have a mic jack with decent preamps. As long as you get a microphone that is higher sensitivity like my Movo VXR10, then you can get high quality audio. Most of the audio on the channel is recorded straight into the M50, and I've always found it to be decent. Not amazing, but decent, good enough. Now, I will concede that a lot of people getting the M50 are not getting very good shots with it. But that doesn't have to do with the M50. It has to do with all the auxiliary things that we just don't spend enough time on. If you look at this shot right here, it took me significantly longer to set up this shot than it took me to record it. It took me probably 2, maybe 3 hours to get this shot, get my background clean and looking good, to get my lighting dialed in to how I like it, so I can have high quality images and high quality audio. Resolution and frame rate and all of that matters less than how you use the equipment that you're using. I hope this video has made it clear of the pros and the cons of the M50 in 2020. And I just want to say, in the end, the camera you get matters less than the story you're trying to tell. If you have a good story, the M50 is plenty good enough to tell it. If your story's lacking, it doesn't matter whether you have 8K, 4K, 120 frames a second in 1080p. If you don't have the story to back up the footage, all you're going to have is pretty shots. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give me a like, subscribe to the channel for more content like this. I'll see you all in the next video. You have to use a lot of ND, and it causes the vignetting that you see here, and then underneath my eyes is just gross. It does not look very good.